Okay, I'm John Jackson, retired county agent, retired Florida Citrus Hall of Fame person, and we're doing an oral history with my good friend,
Fred Saunders,
retired production manager from R.D. Keene Trust in Winter Garden. Well, Fred, you know that the Florida Citrus Hall of Fame inducts people into the Hall of Fame. Another part of our mission is that we're trying to tell the story of the Florida citrus industry in a number of different ways. Brenda Burnett, our executive director, has worked with Polk County on putting up the old label signs, and we have other projects that we're doing, and one of them is oral histories. And I like to do the oral histories because we go out and talk to people and get stories that aren't recorded in the literature or anywhere else. So we're just going to relax, and we're going to talk about citrus here in Lake Ken, Orange County, and what your involvement with it. And I go back to the first week that I came to work for the Extension Service in 1968. And I had a card on my desk from Earl Kelly, who was at a training meeting, and said, try to go see these people. And the first person that I went to see was Werner Hoosman. And we can talk about Doc Hoosman for a while. And it was an interesting experience, and we'll talk about Doc. And the second person that I went to see was Fred Saunders. Now, I didn't know that you probably should have an appointment with these people, so I pulled into the yard down there in Winter Garden, and you were just leaving. And you stopped, and I talked to you through the window of the car. And I can remember like it was yesterday, and you probably have no recollection of it all because people were stopping all the time. But anyway, I said, you know, I like that guy, and made an appointment as soon as I can. He came back and started talking. So that was 52 years ago.
Wow.
That you and I have had a relationship within the citrus industry. So I think that's rather remarkable. And we've gone through freezes, we've gone through diseases and insects and you name it, and have come out the other side. So I want to talk a little bit about your experience in the citrus industry. I know that, I think I know that early on you worked for Dr. Bryan at the Soil Foundation.
Soil Science Foundation in Lakeland.
Now, how did you get that job?
Well, that was the first job I had after I graduated from University of Florida with a degree in citrus production. It was available, and it was the only job I was offered, so I took it.
I've been there and done that. Tell me about Dr. Bryan. Was he, what kind of a boss and what kind of a person was he?
He was a nice person, and I didn't really get to know him really that well. I mean, he was sort of and my job was to take soil samples primarily, and that's what I did. But sometimes he would come in the morning and decided he wanted to go over somewhere and dig some dirt or off the side of a hill to see what the soil types were, and he'd tell me, okay, you're ready now, I got an apple, you got anything to eat? And away we'd go. With me, nothing to eat. But anyway, and I would do the digging for him.
So you started off as basically a sophisticated gopher. You dug the holes and collected the soil samples.
Yeah, and then I started, they trained me, and I came up and I actually did a lot of it in Lake County. Started taking, when the time came to take the soil samples. Now, the Soil Science Foundation, what it did, it took soil samples, and when they ran the samples, a complete run of the minerals or nutrients, and then they would write a recommendation for what fertilizer, how much and what kind of fertilizer you ought to put on.
Now, there was a fee for that, I assume.
Well, it was a co-op kind of thing. You were a member, and you paid $2 an acre or something, I think.
That a fee.
Something, but yeah, and that's what I did. I left. I'd leave Lakeland Monday morning on those days and come back on Friday afternoon with a carload of bags of dirt. Except when I went to the East Coast. Now, when I went to the East Coast the first time, they told me, well, now here's where this different people you could go could do welding for you. I said, welding? And then they handed me every soil sampling tool we had, because it was going to break off the end of it, most of them, over on the coast in the limestone. So anyway, that was an experience in its own.
Well, it gave you a chance to see the entire industry in a relatively
Yes.
short time. Well, I want to go back a little bit. If I remember correctly, your father was a commercial fisherman
Yes.
in Dunedin, and you told me that your mother could fix mullet 50 different ways.
Well, not quite that many, but it was a lot.
And I assume that the reason you got mullet was that the mullet was low on the food chain as far as what your father could sell the fish for.
You're absolutely correct.
So the snappers and the grouper and everything else went to the market, and the mullet came home.
Oh, that's right.
So how did you go from being exposed to fishing in Dunedin to Gainesville and fruit crops?
My maternal grandparents had a grove, lived on a grove, and my grandfather and grandmother. My grandmother's family came to Florida when it was still a Spanish territory, and they eventually they were in North Florida. They moved on down into what's now Pinellas County. It was Hillsborough County then, and they were all citrus people. And I went and I spent, my grandfather would come pick me up almost every Friday afternoon, and I spent the weekend with my grandparents, and my parents would generally come pick me up on Sunday, and then my brother, who's a year younger, when he got back, we both went up, and I just decided when I was 12 years old that's what I wanted to do.
Did you spend much time on the boat fishing, or were you
Some, but my brother did more of that. He went to the fishing, and I went to the citrus.
What's interesting, my father's uncle was a big packer in Pinellas County, John S. Taylor.
Oh yeah.
In Largo.
Mm-hmm.
And I never realized this until I'm in Gainesville, and I'm in the library, and I'm doing some research for a paper, which were a rare occurrence for me, but I'm doing it. And I'm flipping through the Florida State Hort Society, and all of a sudden I open the 1936 edition, and there's my father looking at me. And I do a double take. No, that's not my father, but it looks an awful lot like him. And sure enough, there's Uncle John Taylor, president of the Florida State Hort Society. And I asked my father, I'm in citrus. How come you didn't tell me that you had an uncle? Well, I didn't think it was all that important. Anyway, so I go to find out that Uncle John was on the first Florida Citrus Commission, that he ran for governor, and he was involved in the effort to separate Pinellas County from Hillsborough County and all that kind of stuff. So our histories kind of go back a ways, and they intermingle back then. So you go to Gainesville, you get a degree, you work for Dr. Bryan. How did you come to Mr. Keene and R.D. Keene Trust Groves?
Well, I'll tell you, Jim Mayfield, he heard about the job. They were opening up, they wanted to hire an assistant for their production manager. And Jim and I we weren't fraternity brothers, but we had all the same citrus classes. We were the same class. And so he knew that that was what I was looking for. And so he called me and told me about the job, and I called and got an interview, and they hired me, and that's what I wanted.
Now that was that the early 60s?
That was in 59.
59. And so the freeze hadn't happened yet, so they had
the 57, 58 freeze, yeah, that occurred when I was working for Dr. Bryan.
Yeah. Well, you know, as I'm looking into, I'm trying to do the history with the signs and everything else, and you hear stories, and they're interesting, but Mr. Keene and Mr. Eichelberger were partners up in Eustis.
Yes.
And there came a time when they decided to separate ways, and one of them said to the other, which side do you want? And Mr. Eichelberger said, well, I'll take the north end, and Mr. Keene took the south end, and so he relocated. I guess had a packing house in Montverde, I think.
Yeah, I had a packing house in Montverde.
So And Mr. Keene did quite well. I think he
Yes.
did a little bit better than Mr. Eichelberger did. The move south was good for him.
And he was a hard-working man. I mean, he would work all day and then drive to Lakeland when they were making up the Citrus Commission, the first Citrus Commission, and stay down there till whatever, and come back and be back at the packing house at 5:30 or 6 o'clock the next morning.
Well, that seemed to be kind of the modus operandi for a lot of these people. You know, hard work was something that they were used to. It was kind of ingrained in them from the very beginning. You know, and we were talking to David Evans this morning, and that same kind of a situation. And you know, I've told this story many times, but I'm a city boy. I grew up in Orlando, and I didn't know that when you were 14 years old, you were expected to throw in and hoe trees, pick fruit, help out, all this kind of stuff. And I've realized that so many people in the agricultural industry started off in it when they were young, and they had to because they were an integral part of their family.
Well, Mr. Keene's father was a foreman for the doctor.
Dr. Phillips?
Dr. Phillips, and that's where he sort of started.
Yeah, so he saw citrus and saw people were making money in citrus and figured out how to get some of it and get involved. So you started off as assistant. You moved to production manager pretty quickly, didn't you?
Yes.
Phil Cross loves to tell a story, and I don't know how true this is, but I'll tell the story. Phil Cross loved to tell the story that your predecessor and Mr. Keene had a discussion, and somehow your predecessor made some comment about the carpenter that was working for Mr. Keene, and Mr. Keene told this guy, he said, production manager a dime a dozen, but it's hard to find a good carpenter. And so,
well, that's basically the part of the story was the guy was actually my boss at that point. He really wanted to be more. In fact, he even suggested Mr. Keene retire and put him in charge, but that didn't go very far. He and the carpenter was working in a house that they had for one of the foremen, and I was outside, and it was just when he was still training me. I mean, this was like in the end of May, and I started to work 1st of April. And the carpenter came out, and I don't know, anyway, I don't know what, there was some verbalish going back and forth, and I guess the carpenter turned around and I guess he hit the man at the time, and then he was, well, he was feeling pretty good because he was going to get the carpenter fired, and it had some other ramifications. But anyway, he ended up, well, he was incapacitated for a while, and then, well, in all honesty, he was told not to. Said he was going to file a suit against the carpenter, and he was told not to do it. That he wouldn't. That he couldn't do that, but he did it anyway, and that ended his relationship. And I, at a very young age,
all of a sudden, you went from the learning stage to I'm now it.
I'm it.
Steep learning curve, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that it was. Sometimes you just need to get thrown in over your head to find out if you're going to be able to swim or not. And,
yeah, that's true.
And you learned in a hurry.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there were a lot of people in the industry that, I found this out early on, Fred, that there are so many people out there who are more than willing to help. All you had to do is go ask George Howard something, and he'd tell you everything. It was those secrets that were there. So they knew you were a young guy, and they were willing to help out.
Oh, yeah. And when they first started the Hillbillies, and I was the youngest one there by far. I said, well, Fred wasn't even around. He probably wasn't even born when we were spraying with hand sprayers or something like that. It was always, I took my share of the.
You were just a kid.
Yeah.
But some of those guys were really really interesting characters, and we need to talk a little bit about some of these people. I know that you were offered an opportunity to go work for Werner Hoosman.
Yes.
So you tell me your Werner Hoosman story, and I'll tell you my Werner Hoosman story.
Well, Dr. Hoosman said he wanted to talk to me one time. He called me, and as I recall, he came over to my house. I was living in Claremont, and of course, he wasn't very far away. And he was asking me, he was talking about the grapefruit that we had, and they said, somebody said, you got the best looking grapefruit. The one I well, what all did you do? And I started telling him, well, that's too much. Anyway, and I'm trying to remember if this is all happened at one time anyway, but anyway, he offered me a job to come work for him for about 80% of what I was making.
But you'd get to work for Doc Hoosman.
But I'd get to work for Doc Hoosman, but I turned down his offer.
Well, Doc Hoosman was an economist by training, and he was a PhD in economist, and he taught at Gainesville for a little while. I don't know how he ended up at Apshawa Groves. It must have been his wife must have been involved somehow.
I don't know. I do know that, gosh, I can't remember what his name was. The professor I had under there had an irrigation experiment in Dr. Hoosman's grove down there.
Oh,
Ziegler.
Louis Ziegler?
Louis Ziegler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Doc Hoosman, they grew a lot of grapefruit.
Yeah.
And I imagine that when he found out that you grew grapefruit that were equal to or better than the quality of grapefruit that he was growing, he had to find out why. And Doc was like that. He wasn't about to be second best if there's any way he could avoid it. And most of his grapefruit went to Lakeland Packing. And so I remember that being an economist, Doc was all about numbers. And so my first experience, like I said, the first grower I went to see, I pulled up to his barn at Apshawa, which is north of Claremont, by the way, folks. And a co-op back there, he had a stone house down in a little valley with a lake there. And then the barn was up on the hill. And I pulled into the barn, and there was a big tanker truck parked on the lot. And Doc Hoosman, in his riding jodhpurs, he always wore these pants that, you would see the horseback people riding.
Yep.
And he drove an old Army Jeep with no top on it, like 100 miles an hour through the grove, scare you to death. So Doc was there, and I introduced myself to him. If Doc's a few inches taller than I am, and he's right up in my face. And where'd you come from? And I said, well, I work in a grove in Fort Pierce. And so he started asking me how much did it cost to grow fruit down there, all this kind of stuff. And I had no answers for him. So he said, Jackson, he said, let me give you a lesson in economics. First day on the job, and I'm getting a lesson from Doc Hoosman. He says, see that tank over there? He said, it's full of oil. He said, I ordered that oil from Tampa, and I paid 7 cents a gallon for it. And I had to pay that carrier 2 cents a gallon to haul it over here. He said, you see this drum here, this 30-gallon, it's got emulsifying in there, and that makes that oil be able to be mixed up for a pesticide. And that's costing me a half a cent for the finished product to do it. And I'm standing out here metering it in here. So he said, I've got 11.5 cents a gallon in my spray oil. He said, do you know how much everybody else is buying this stuff from the pep companies for? I had no earthly idea. He said, they're paying as much as 13 and 14 cents a gallon. You know, how stupid are they, you know, and I can get it for 11.5. All I have to do is mix it up. And so from then on out, for Doc, it was all about money and how much it cost him. And he would evaluate, if I'm putting on fertilizer and it's costing me 25 cents, I better get 30 cents more a box for my fruit, or it's a waste to put it out. So those are the kind of lessons you learned. And grapefruit early on wasn't much of an income producer. You know, I guess you were lucky if you got 25, 30 cents a box, you know, on the tree, something like this for a while. And when the market went up and Doc was getting $2.50 a box for his grapefruit, he told me one time, he said, Jackson, this is almost like stealing. Oh, so it was interesting. But Doc had a number of interesting assistants. Don Fox worked with him.
Oh, yeah.
Bill Kazicki worked with him for a while.
Yeah, and I think Bill West, did Bill West work for him?
Bill West might have worked for him before he went to Libby's, and
Yeah.
so you know, it's
No, I thought he worked for him maybe after he came back when he left Libby, but I don't know. Anyway,
it's hard to keep up with things. But you know, we're talking about assistant production managers. You had some really first-class assistant production managers. How were you able to get such great guys like David Gurney to work for you? Did you know David by reputation? Or?
Well, David Gurney was my neighbor. He lived about 4 or 5 houses from me, and I knew he was working for. You know who he was working for?
Libby?
No, he worked for down on 27.
Likes?
No,
It doesn't make too much.
Anyway, he owned hundreds of acres out in there. Anyway, he and I talked to him enough. I just realized how good he was, and then because I talked to Mr. Keene about this is who I wanted to hire, and he said, well, he and this guy that owned that grove were big buddies, and they owned horses, walking horses.
Tennessee Walkers, yeah.
And together, in the same place. Anyway, David would have to quit before I could offer him the position. So that took place in about 30 minutes. Yeah, we got that done. But anyway, and David was a real good.
Yeah, Dave. We had lunch a while back. You and David and Benny McLean and I. And Benny McLean and David grew up in high school together, and they've been friends for a long time and partners and everything else. And so, it's fun to go through those stories and live those things, because it was like a family.
Yeah. High Acres is what I was trying to think of.
Oh, Mr. Bradshaw. Well,
Bradshaw.
I'd leave Mr. Bradshaw too and go work with you.
Yeah, but anyway.
So, you've had some great production managers and assistant production managers that work with you. Let's talk a little bit about some of the Winter Garden citrus community. Winter Garden was a strong citrus town. A lot of people there, and you said you were in Hillbillies, and Hillbillies, by the way, for the viewers, was an organization of citrus production managers, and there were several of them around the state. They started in Polk County.
They started in Polk County, and then this one was patterned after the Polk County one.
Yeah, the Polk County called themselves Ridge Runners.
Yeah.
And they became a very exclusive organization. You had to really be in the group to be in the Ridge Runners. Hillbillies was somewhat like that. And of course,
the deal was we had 10 production managers and one fertilizer man and one pesticide man. That was the
core group.
That was the core group.
Well, I think that Bob Norris was either an honorary member or he was involved in somehow in it. And then Earl Kelly came in and he was involved. And
yeah, I think it did. And then the one in Polk and Orange County,
Henry Swanson
was involved. I think that we sort of took that sort of expansion, but the other was the first.
Kind of rotated around. Well, I know that when I started, that was kind of the elite group of growers, and I tell this story, Fred, and a number of times, but I like the story anyway. So when I graduated from Gainesville, it was in '68, and in '67 we had that huge crop. Everybody pruned after the '62 freeze, rejuvenated the trees, and then by '67 you had a huge crop. Price went down, and I'm graduating with a master's degree from Gainesville, and nobody's hiring because they didn't get any money for their fruit. And the Extension Service is trying to put a position in Lake County, and they talked to me about the job, but university works slow. And I had a baby on the way and was graduating, so I said, I can't wait around here for you to get the job. So anyway, I go to Fort Pierce and I take a job as an assistant production manager. And I had no idea what in the hell I was getting into because I had never worked in the Grove before. And after about 4 months, the Extension Service got everything worked out and offered me the position in Lake County and to work in Lake and Orange County. Well, I was in Fort Pierce, getting up at 5:30 in the morning, picking up the mechanic, going out to the Grove, working 6 days a week, doing things that I had no earthly idea what was going on. I'd go out there on the first Saturday to drive a tractor to figure out how you even drove a tractor, and bringing home a check for $135 a week. So it didn't take me long to make the decision to move up to Lake County. And then I'd been here not too long, and I'm looking, I'm saying, you know, these production managers, they're in the Grove at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm just getting up. I get home at 5 and they're still out there in the Grove. I'm a USDA employee. I'm on civil service retirement. I'm a University of Florida faculty member. I get 22 days of paid annual leave, all these vacations, and I'm wondering, they think they got the best job in the industry. Hell, I had the best job in the industry, and you guys just didn't know it. But anyway, but the production manager's job were, as I describe it, the fighter pilots of the industry, because on your shoulders rested decisions about what you did to produce the crop. And without a crop, no packing house, no processing plant, no harvesting crews, everything else. And so the brunt of the responsibility fell on you. So when you started out, who were some of the production managers that you could kind of go to that would give you a little advice? I had a mentor that helped me out.
Well, let's see. I can't, here again, John Kennedy was one, and then, but these were the ones that when I really didn't see them at the time except when Hillbillies was meeting. One in Lake Region.
Don Kemp.
Don Kemp.
Charlie Root with lights.
Charlie Root. Charlie Root was a great one for that.
Charlie was always help somebody out.
Yeah.
He and Bob Freeman shared an office there in Winter Garden.
Yeah. Then there was a couple that, and then there was one, I can't remember the names now.
Now, Randy Williams, was he in the Hillbillies or was Dan McKinnon? Dan McKinnon wouldn't join something like that.
Dan McKinnon did not belong to the Hillbillies. And Randy was not in the Hillbillies.
Okay.
At least he wasn't then. I don't think he ever did.
How about was Arlen Jumper or George McClure? Were they?
George McClure was in. George McClure was one of the original members.
And so, if you know anything about citrus in this area, you're talking about the guys who really were involved with with the production of a lot of acreage.
Yeah.
This was a co-op area. You weren't working for a co-op, but this was a co-op area. Aside from Keene, Bradshaw, and maybe Libby's, there was a whole lot of co-ops. Plymouth Citrus Growers with Bill Matthews was there. Then he went to Winter Garden.
Then the guy in Winter Garden was in it, and the one was
Jimmy Cooper from Mount Dora might have been in there.
Yeah, he was in.
I don't remember who was the production manager before Bill Matthews went to Winter Garden. Everett was the general manager. I don't think he ran the Groves.
Well, Everett was kind of. I think Everett moved from production manager
to general manager, and that's when Bill went there.
And I'm trying to think who you sent the notice that just died long ago. That was working for Coca-Cola. He always came to our meetings here. His dad was head of the co-op on this side of Winter Garden. I mean, in there, Winter Garden citrus growers.
Well, Billy Arrington.
Bill Arrington.
Bill's dad, singer. At South Lake.
Yeah, South Lake, yeah.
Was quite a collection of individuals, and Fred, you grew up in Dunedin, you went to school in Gainesville. In 1970 or 71, a group of us went on a trip to California.
Yep.
And that was a trip that we need to document somehow. We need to get Lester Austin and a few others and sit and talk about that trip. But one of the highlights of the trip was not visiting an orange grove, but do you remember when we stopped and put chains on the bus and went up into Sequoia Park?
Yes.
How often had you seen snow before?
That was the first snow I ever saw in my life.
I thought so. And you were not a child, you were well mature, but I can remember this. Those of you that grew up north and are familiar with snow, you can't imagine, but there were a number of us that had seen none or very little snow. And in the morning, we're in an orange grove, we're watching them pick navel oranges. We go to a packing house, we have a Mexican lunch, we all load up on the bus and we take off. And after an hour or two, whatever, I don't remember what it was, the bus driver stops and he starts putting chains on the tires. And people are saying, what in the heck is he doing? And we had a fellow extension agent, John Pearson from California, who was our guide that day. He said, you'll see, guys, you'll see. And sure enough, it wasn't too long, and we're up in Sequoia Park. It had snowed about 2 feet the previous 3 days. It was absolutely gorgeous, hanging on the limbs and trees. And Pearson takes us up and back to the General Grant or whatever the big sequoia tree was there. And grown men like this one are playing in the snow, throwing snowballs. John High, I thought I couldn't get him back on the bus. But we went and we were there for a week, and I guarantee you the highlight of the trip for most everybody was playing in the snow. Grown men playing in the snow.
Well, wasn't there a couple of older compared to what we were then, women on there that were growers, and they had never seen snow.
Yeah,
they were quite a bit older than we were.
So it was really a fantastic experience. So those are the kind of things that that you remember. One of the big things that Extension did, and we were a conduit from growers to researchers back and forth, but we had an advisory committee that was the heart of my program. You must have been on the Citrus Advisory Committee here for 40 years or more, for a long time.
A long time. I don't know if it was that long.
But it was, the relationship that existed between the extension agent and the advisory committee was hard to describe, because it was like we were all working together. I figured I had arrived when advisory committees are talking about our program did this, our program. And so when you took ownership of it, then is when things started to go. You were chairman of the advisory committee, and the thing is that I could call on any member and ask for help, and you were there. And if I remember correctly, you were one of the growers that Townsend, the guy in Lake Alfred, selected to put out a comparison between the university's pest management program and the growers program. And y'all had a grove in Lake County or someplace where he took 10 acres and sprayed it like he wanted to, and you sprayed yours on your normal program.
I'm having a hard time remembering that, because we did that.
But I know, I'm almost positive, he was a big guy, and I know that you were probably surprised at some of the results, because Mr. Keene believed in treating his trees the best he possibly could. And so he spared very little. In fact, at one time, how many pounds of nitrogen was he putting out before you finally got him convinced?
Well, I don't think I ever did convince him. I can't remember, but it wasn't double what we needed, but it was real high.
I thought at one time he was putting out 500 or 600 pounds of nitrogen, and university was talking about 200 pounds or something.
Well, the one we did, that happened in one grove. There was one grove down there at the where the turnpike gets off of 50 now. It was on the north side there. And he bought that grove, and it was a small grove, I don't know, 20 acres or something. But it had a lot of tangerines, temples in it. And it was set, and we did in that time, most of our settings were 25 feet, 20 feet was close in the row, you know. Yep. But that grove was like a 12 or 15 foot, and the deal was with the fertilizer, and I'll have to give you this, the background. When it came time to fertilize, I would get my book, we kept a book of records, and every Saturday morning I went in and filled in the work orders for the week, and what had been done, and how much, and whatnot. And how many, every time we inspected a grove, we put down what we saw and whatnot. But anyway, I'd take that in with a fertilizer thing, and I'd tell Mr. Keene what I thought it ought to have per acre. And first we would discuss the fertilizer formula. And then he would tell me how much it was going to get. And I would say, yes, sir, and fill it out and go on. But that grove, I really argued with him with, because he was putting, it was just that one grove, but he was putting way too much.
Yeah, he was probably fertilizing per tree.
That's exactly what he said. Son, I'm fertilizing trees, I'm not fertilizing pasture. I'd said something, well, this is too much per acre. And that's what he told me. I said, yes, sir. And we put it on, and those temples they just collapsed. The nitrogen was so high that they just got soft. They ended up having to juice them. I couldn't pack them. But anyway, that was what he wanted, and that's what he got.
He finally backed down. I think they finally got on a reasonable program in that way. So it was always, an experience when you have an owner like that for you. So I know that you had to learn in a hurry that if you wanted to get something done, you somehow probably had to let Mr. Keene think it was his idea.
Well, you had to come in the back door a little sometimes. Now, I remember one time we had the grove at Windermere, had houses on it, and the workers lived on that, the production employees. And we were trying to get him to fix one of them up because it wouldn't. Well, he didn't want to spend the money to put something in. I said, well, we just can't put anybody in there because those floors are so rotten. If they fall through and get hurt, then they're liable to sue. A week later, they were putting the floor in. So sometimes you had to be a little...
show him what the alternative really was.
Yeah, we'll just give him, which was a true alternative. But,
yeah. Well, that was a beautiful grove at Lake Butler. That's now one of many. This is the story that I tell. I went to a golf tournament a couple of days ago. My grandson was playing in the state 2A golf tournament championship at Mission Inn. He did very well, by the way. But I've been going to golf tournaments with him in high school, and I don't play golf at all, and he knows that. And so we'd be playing at Kings Ridge, or we'd be playing at Bella Vista, or we'd be playing at Orange National. And I'd say, man, Nick, this golf course has changed since the last time I was here. And he'd look at me and say, Bampa, you don't play golf. I'd say, yeah, but Nick, this wasn't a golf course the last time I was here. And so all those properties that you used to manage now down on 27 are all subdivisions. Kings Ridge was probably the first one that started. I don't know whether.
Yeah, Kings Ridge was the first.
And then there's one across the street, and then you got all the Chase property is all in subdivisions now and everything else. So we kind of saw this evolution, and it really didn't take place when Disney came. Mr. Keene wasn't interested in selling his prime groves for real estate because he was making money in the citrus business.
Yeah, and actually, even I think after, I can't remember, no, it was for about 68, I think is when we did this. He bought more land on the grove in Windermere that went out to the road in the back, because he's one, and he got me, we had in those days, that was before Jeep became a good Jeep. He had an old Jeep thing, and we went down there he wanted to ride into that grove and or woods and look at it. And I was driving, and he went up and sat on the fender in the front so the way he could look at it. I was scared to death he was going to fall off of there and I was going to run over him. But
That would have been a good insurance report to write up.
yeah.
Well, Fred, one of the stories I remember you telling me about Mr. King and is his first experience when you were able to get him to agree to have you put a hedging machine into a grove.
Yeah.
And for,
No, he decided he wanted to do it.
oh, he did.
Yeah. Heller Brothers made the first hedging machine that was around, one-sided. So it didn't like anything like we got today, just a line of saws on one side. Well, so then they built it there in Winter Garden. Well, he got the second one, and he had it built, this was in the early '60s. Now, '60 was a extremely heavy rain year, and it was flooding and everything. And Donna hit us, and in March of '60, there was 3 days there that every rain gauge we had ran over each day. So, and then we had Donna in September. So I mean, it was a lot of water. '61 just dried up. I mean, if you took the average, you're pretty good shape, but that wasn't helping when you're that dry. And that's when we really started putting in irrigation. But he had bought that hedger, or had it, and we were hedging. And actually, we went into that grove that's now the King's Ridge, and we just hedged all 4 sides the first year because there wasn't any. Got so dry, they lost so much fruit. You really weren't losing any fruit. But then we went to the grapefruit on the grove at Pine Island, and that one we got. Of course, it was one-sided, so you had to sort of get it laid off, and we had one full row cut, and he was coming back down the road cutting another one, and Mr. Keene drove up and looked at that and said, he just said, and we were cutting off some big limbs, because I mean, this was a grapefruit grove that had totally grown together. There was no, you didn't have to worry about any weed control, because there wasn't enough sunlight ever got down to the ground to grow weeds unless it was a reset. And he just looked at it and said, look at that, is there any way to get that SOB out of here without it cutting its way out? And I said, no, sir, it's got to cut its way out. And he said, okay.
Finish this row and get the hell out of here.
Yeah, that's what we did. Next year we came back in and did it, but he had to get accustomed to what it was going to do.
Yeah, my advice to growers was decide on when you're going to hedge in the spring, and then plan to take a trip to Carolina for a couple of weeks, because you don't want to be there and watch it, because don't cut it a little bit wider, and pretty soon they're not doing it much good, cutting the trees out of there. Well, there are a couple other things that I wanted to bring up, but Fred, to me it was so wonderful that I could be a part of an industry where it's like it's a big family, and you had employees, but they were almost as if they were family to you. You treated them like they were family and helped them out, and I could get involved and know all these things because we'd sit down and share and talk about personal issues. I mean, I talking about your father being a fisherman and everything else, and so it was fun. But I need to let you know that even though you have no earthly idea how your family had a fantastic and life-changing impact on me, and I'm going to tell you this story because I think it's typical of what happens. When Joanne passed away, I went to the funeral in Claremont. And to tell you the truth, I'd been active in my church, I'd been an elder, I'd gone through all of this, and then there were some issues that happened, and my wife and I quit going to church. So anyway, I go to Joanne's funeral, and people are talking about her. She would do this for the cheerleaders. And I looked around the church, and every time someone would mention something, that she was involved with or you were involved with, I noticed all these heads nodding. Oh yeah, I remember that, I remember that. And it just slapped me in the side of the head. You know, I'm missing out on so much because for some petty deal, I left the church, which was stupid. But look at the impact that one person had on that whole church. And Fred, I went back to church after that because of what happened at her funeral and the impact that I saw that she had and you had in that church. And I've been going ever since. So I want to thank you for a life-changing event. You never knew that, but it was all because of the life that you led and the family and everything else. You know, I understood, and we talked about Dean and Mary Jo and Bruce and kind of shared what was going on. I suffered with you in the blueberry situation, and I was telling your grandson how cedar waxwings would come in.
Oh yeah.
And you first were able to use Measure-All or something like that. You could put it out, and the birds would get sick, and they'd quit. And then the EPA or somebody wouldn't let you use that. So then you're going to nets to try to keep them out.
Oh,
I kind of suffered with you through all that and learned some of those things with how you did.
That was tough.
And so anyway, we've had 50 years of friendship. We've gone to California together. We've shared stories, and I've been thrilled. I don't know of anything else, Trent, to talk about right now, but I can tell you right now, you got one fantastic grandfather, and we've shared some stories together. We've had some good times together, and he's always been there for me. And he's always been there for his employees, and that's what it's really all about. So anyway, I'm glad, and my last one is going to be this story. Well, two things. Fred was really lucky in that Mr. Keene's grandson took over the management of R.D. Keene. And Rex was a Vanderbilt graduate. I'm sure Rex didn't spend an awful lot of time hoeing trees when he was growing up.
Yeah, you're right.
But Rex did come to work out at the shop a little bit to learn the business. And I remember.
Well, he rode with us some, and of course, I let David Gurney do a lot of that.
Well, and I was going to say, and David related to me and related to us when we had that lunch, how impressed he was with Rex. Rex was the grandson of the illustrious R.D. Keene, and you would think that someone in that position would let you know that my granddaddy is your boss. And David said it was just the opposite, that Rex was the most humble person, just a sponge for information, and was so respectful. And when Rex took over running the business, I thought that the way that he interacted with you was rather remarkable. Talk a little bit about Rex and your relationship with the kid who was a generation behind you, but took over the business.
Yeah, but he was one who always listened, and pretty much let me do whatever I thought. But a lot of it, of course, I had to get his okay on. And of course, he told me at the meeting in Lakeland this year, and he told me that we had been a big part of their family. And of course, Jan and Trey were there both too, but I didn't see Trey, but Jan was there, and I'd seen him at your thing before, so it was kind of more than just a employee relationship.
Well, I think what exemplifies a relationship is that that when the freezes came, early '80s, Rex was a number man. You didn't know how much money the family had. That wasn't your business. But Rex was a number man, and he talked to the family, and he came to you and said, Fred, the family has X amount of dollars to reinvest in the citrus business. you pick out the property, you select the varieties, and you select the rootstocks. Is that
Yeah,
basically?
pretty much. And each, of course, there were the family, even though it was broke up into many owners. I mean, Ms. Keene owned some, their daughter owned some, you know, Rex owned some, his mother owned some, and there were some corporations. So I mean, it was, and each one had, I guess, their own financial situation, because that was, like you say, that was not part of.
Yeah, but I think it's the ultimate compliment when the young man who controlled the purse strings turned over the key decisions to you, which to me says the guy was pretty perceptive, and he's really a great guy. So Rex is on the Hall of Fame board with me, and several years ago we were at one of the luncheons, and he said, "Have you talked to Fred lately?" I said, "No, I haven't seen Fred in a little while." He said, "You ought to talk to Fred." I said, "Anything in particular?" "Well, ask Fred if he's been giving some advice to a lady about trees in her backyard." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, just see what happens." And Fred told me that, yeah, somebody's lady asked him to come look at a tree in the yard, and he'd gone over there and talked to it. Next time he went back, asked the tree, there was supper ready and so forth. And next time I saw Rex, he said, "Let me tell you how bad it's gotten." I said, "How bad is it?" He said, "Well," he said, "two things." He said, "One, Fred's learning to dance. And second, he's missing the Georgia-Florida football game." I said, "What?" He said, "Yep. Fred's dancing, he's having a wedding, Georgia-Florida football game." And I said, the world is going to come to an end pretty soon. So anyway, it was, I thought that was really fantastic. And I get emails from my high school, somebody's maintaining a newsletter, you know, and what's so sad is that 90% of the information that comes in through those emails are relative to a classmate who's dying of cancer, who's died or something like this. And I get so frustrated that we need to share positive things. You know, life is full of negative stuff, and it's time to start showing some positive things. So I'm going to write a little story, and hopefully I'll send it in, about a classmate. This is kind of off the subject a little bit, but I heard from a classmate that I hadn't seen in 60 years, and he said, "I want to tell you how much I appreciate you letting me play basketball with you." I said, "What do you mean letting you play basketball?" He said, "Well, you might not realize this, but," he said, "we moved into the area. I was a chubby little kid that was a geek. I wasn't in any group in school, but you and a couple of friends in our little neighborhood let me play basketball with you, and I thought it was really important, had a big change in my life." And he said, "I went on to the University of Miami, got a degree, and it was Vietnam, and the Navy was interested in recruiting people. I went to med school and was in the Navy during that program, so they could have me when I got out. I liked the Navy. I graduated from med school. I became a psychiatrist, joined the Navy, managed Bethesda Naval Hospital, had an employees, 5,000, a budget of $2 billion, became a rear admiral, and then I retired and decided that I'd become a university president for 5 years. Ended up with multiple melanoma. 10 years ago, wasn't given but 6 months to live. So I lost 3 inches, but I'm still here. And I'm thinking, you know, here's this little old geeky high school kid that becomes a psychiatrist, a rear admiral, and a university president. So you just never know what's going to happen to your classmates or what's going to take place. And so, you know, there are a lot of wonderful stories out there, and I appreciate you sharing yours with me. And more importantly, I appreciate you being a dear friend of mine for 50 plus years.
Hey, that's been great, because you've been a good friend too. So
it's been we've had a lot of fun together.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to give you some advice. I'm pointing to your grandson. There's nothing that makes grandparents happier than interacting with grandkids and being a part of it. But when they get to be your age, we don't go to baseball games and stuff like that. So I'm giving you the challenge that every couple of months, you and your wife need to call Grandpa and say, hey, we're coming up, let's go to dinner. I guarantee you, he'll pick up the tab. He'll pick up the tab. Go out, tell him what's going on in your life. He will be thrilled, and you will remember it for the rest of your life too. So do a little bit of that, and it'll go a long way. I know, I've got 8 of them, and I can't spend enough time with them because I know that the older they get, the less cool I'll become. When they're 12 and 10, I'm a pretty good guy, but by the time they get to be 15, I'm an old timer, you know, no good.
I have a couple questions for you. In terms of the way the industry has changed over the years, and two different things. What has made the most impact on you in terms of the industry changes, and then who are some of the people who have impacted your life the most?
Well, of course, the changes is the fact that the industry's just, around here anyway, just sort of disappeared. I mean, that was the freezes, and then of course the greening. What the freezes didn't get, the greening finished, about finishing off. Maybe, hopefully not, but, and well, of course the Keens, obviously, because I work for them, well, Doctor, I can't remember who the first one I worked for.
Dr. Bryan.
Dr. Bryan, and well, some of the salespeople that we dealt with were good.
People like Randy Williams.
Randy Williams and O'Neill Smith and
Ralph Roan and
yeah.
some of these old guys.
Yeah, I mean, they all had and some of the guys. Now, we had a deal for years. We would all get generally get somebody started, and then we'd all end up about 8 o'clock in the morning at a restaurant in Winter Garden and have breakfast together. And a lot of times the salesman would come in and buy breakfast, which was great, but sometimes it wouldn't, it didn't matter. But in that we shared a lot of information. Who's using what, and is it working? Or some new pesticide out, you know, okay, well, somebody said, well, it didn't do what it's supposed to do. Well, then, so everybody, it gives you caution, you know, just a sharing of, and you know, that was a very valuable thing. And then, of course, in the latter years, it got changed when basically we didn't have anything up here. It was all in LaBelle, and then all of a sudden, I wasn't production manager. I was production and harvesting manager. And that changed.
Plus, it wasn't a 45-minute drive from his office, from his house to his office. It was a 2.5-hour drive down and 2.5-hour drive back.
How about 3? Yeah. When we started that, when they bought that grove in, I think, 84 or 85, there were 17 stoplights between Winter Garden and the grove. When they sold it in 2015, I think it was 78 or 80 stoplights between Winter Garden and LaBelle.
And I admire those people who are still hanging in here doing it.
And the thing of it is, I had a guy call me when I still had my real estate license, and he wanted to buy a bunch of land and put it in a bunch of grove, but he wanted to buy a 100-acre grove that was making money. I had to tell him, that doesn't exist.
You're gonna
and he wanted it north of somewhere. I mean, he didn't want it to be on the East Coast or far south. I mean, it was an impossibility. That's what he wanted. But that's, you know.
Well, if someone comes up with a solution for greening, there's still some land left in this county. You know, and I worked with a grower on Dewey Robbins Road, and there's signs out there, Fred. So if they find a solution to greening, you and I need to buy about 5,000 acres on Dewey Robbins Road and bring the Lake County citrus industry back. I don't really think so.
I don't think so. Hey, I don't think it'd get that big before I'm gonna be gone.
That's right. So anyway, it's a big family, and we've enjoyed being a part of it.